Hey, and welcome into the Big Ten Huddle. I'm your host, JR. We've got a lot to talk about going on in the Big Ten. We have a jam packed episode for you tonight. We have so much to cover, so much to go over. We have coaching interviews with the NFL that is going on. We have a rumor about a wide receiver in the Big Ten who could possibly be on his way out already because he's been dismissed from the team. We have Penn State and everybody coming back there, but they also need to hire a new defensive coordinator. The national championship is in less than a week. And, Zach, we have got to decide who is going to get fired out of all these head coaches. We'll decide that at the end. But, Zach, are you ready for this episode tonight?
Listen, I just want to know where Lou Holtz is. That's all I want to know.
He is not coaching and will not be in coaching in a very long time. I want Lou Holtz to run out in front of the team, though, at the national championship.
Can he be an honorary captain? Can he be like? Can that be the first time that Ryan Day and Lou Holtz see each other in like a year and a half?
Did you see that Ryan Day said he hadn't seen or talked to Lou Holtz?
I did. He had a smirk on his face though. He wasn't. People were like, "Oh, he's soft." I'm like, guys, come on. He's having fun with that. He's not. I don't think he's actually mad about that anymore.
Yeah, they asked him. They were like, "Have you talked to him?" And he was like, "No," and just left it at that. So
yeah.
Oh boy, fun stuff. Well, Zach, if anybody is listening, feel free to let us know in the comments section. We are glad to converse with you during the show. Super chats are always welcome as well. We always get to those too. But if you guys have anything else, I am just going to go ahead and get us started because we got a lot to get to. Well, of course, there is basketball going on, and Philip will rightly so be bragging to John, 94-69. And John asks if this is a safe space. Yes, John. We will talk football. Don't worry. Indiana's favorite subject at the moment because basketball.
Kurt Cignetti's still your coach.
Yeah. Yeah, you can turn off the basketball game now, John. You can listen to the podcast instead. It's okay. All right, Zach, let's get to our first thing to talk about here. We have, where's my graphic? There it is. All right, so Adam Gorney works for Rivals, and he tweeted out earlier today, I would say probably about 4 o'clock, I think it was. He tweeted out, hearing a big-time name in portal receiver was possibly kicked off his new team. He did say that he would be working and doing some digging, but he has not gotten back to us, at least from what I have seen. I will check again just to make sure. But, Zach, the big-time receiver that left, actually it just dropped right now, a minute in. Who would have thought? I'm so glad I checked Twitter. Jonte Cook is leaving the Washington program. He has decided to part ways, is what On3 has said. We will see if that's what, if it's him or if it's the university, whatever. But Jonte Cook was going to be a huge piece for this team. Of course, if you followed the drama of Jonte Cook, he did leave the Texas program back in November, I think is when it was reported. I don't know if it actually happened sooner than that, but that did happen. He went to Washington. Obviously did not work out there. Zach, I don't know if there's much to react to with this because this is still a developing situation, but what are your thoughts here?
I mean, I think I want to be cautious because we still don't know everything going on. But I think the thing that comes to mind, and this is not just about Cook, it's not just about Washington, but I think one of the big things as teams navigate the portal is figuring out who the right fits are for your program. And I think we're seeing it with the Damon Wilson stuff with Ohio State, is fans are upset because it seems like Wilson's going to go to Missouri and not Ohio State. They're like, why wouldn't Wilson go to Ohio State? And
Damon
I think
Wilson, you're talking
about,
correct?
Damon Wilson. And I think the reason is because Damon Wilson wants a bag. Like, I'm assuming, I don't know if that's true, but I think that's
the rumor, yeah.
That's the rumor. And I think the thing that has struck me, and I like with Ohio State, I think with Michigan a year ago, they're getting portal kids to come to that buy into their culture more than they care about money. Now they're still getting paid, and they do care about money. I'm not trying to say like, that it's completely altruistic. That's not what I'm saying. But I think a lot of people said in the NIL era, well, money talks. And I would actually argue that I think the best schools in the portal era are the ones that will be choosy about who they bring in from the transfer portal and be choosy about who they link up with NIL deals. I, that's my thought, because I think Washington was like, we just need a star receiver. And I think they got burned on this.
Yeah, I mean, Washington does have Denzel Boston on their roster still, so that's definitely a good situation there for them. And then they do have a promising sophomore that the writers are talking about, and Rashid Williams. But, if he was really that promising, he probably would have played last year. So it's one of those situations. There is always the sophomore leap. It's going to be hard to replace Giles Jackson, right? He was a good receiver for him this year.
Really good.
And trying to replace him is going to be difficult. Obviously, Jonte Cook was somebody who had the ability to do that, but you look back on it all, and if he's, like you said, not a good fit culturally, if he's not somebody that fits the situation well, then it's like you can have all the talent in the world, but if if you don't fit the culture, if you don't fit the team, it's not going to go well for you, and you're probably not going to produce there.
Yep. Well, and it's I think it behooves programs to look at their previous situation. Texas and Cook parted ways beforehand. The conversation behind closed doors was that he was kicked off the team. So, like, if you're recruiting a player who was kicked off his previous team, or at the very least, it was a mutual agreement, that should give you a signal that, like, what are you going to do to make it better? Mm-hmm. Like, is that player going to is that player going to take coaching? Is that player going to be a good locker room fit? You don't know. And so, again, we don't know everything going on with Cook, but I think it does speak to portal strategy and thinking, okay, how does this player fit? And we should probably look beyond the star rating and their production, and we actually need to look beyond that.
Right. And it's important to also reference that these situations happen, and sometimes, yes, it can be a bad fit and they didn't get along with the team, and sometimes it can also be bad situation or bad decisions by the players, whether that's speeding ticket or whatever. And sometimes, I mean, we still have to remember these are still college students. They break up with their girlfriend. It's not what I'm saying happened here, but if you are somebody that's older, think back to when you were a college student. That kind of stuff mattered a whole lot. Now, it probably shouldn't matter more than your football career, because Jonte Cook is somebody who probably has enough talent to be able to go to the NFL. But, I mean, when you're a college student, you don't always think about all that kind of stuff. So, obviously, whatever happened here, we just hope the best situation for Jonte Cook. Hopefully, he can find wherever he needs to go, and the best situation for Washington as well. Hopefully, they're able to find somebody out of the transfer portal and able to get them on this team to help them. So, I don't have a list of available transfers in front of me, but I would assume they'll probably need to go to the spring portal to find somebody. So, anything else on Zach before we move on?
Nope.
All right. Let's do Wink Martindale is interviewing for the Falcons, the Colts, and the Bengals defensive coordinator job. Wink Martindale came in last year. He was a big name. Obviously, Michigan fans were very excited about him. They were calling him the godfather of the Ravens defense that Jesse Minter and Mike McDonald had been running. McDonald was out after 1 year, I believe it was. He was out after 1 year at Michigan and moved on to be the defensive coordinator at the Ravens. Jesse Minter spent 2 years with Michigan, and then Harbaugh took him with him over to the Chargers. Now you have Wink Martindale coming in, the highest paid, if not the highest paid defensive coordinator, not the highest paid coordinator. I believe he was the highest paid defensive coordinator in all of college football this year. There's a lot of talk about how he hadn't been in college football since like the early 2000s. He had never really been at this level, and he never really recruited at this level. So there's speculation about if it was something he'd want to do long term. You tell me, this signals to me that he's not really interested in being in college football long term. That his play was always just kind of to get back to the NFL, which is fine. Everybody, has different things they want. But I mean, if I'm Sharon Moore, even if he doesn't get one of these three jobs, I'm preparing for next year, hoping that Wink Martindale has a good enough year that somebody will hire him to the NFL because it's obvious that's where he wants to be, not college football.
Yeah, and I think, there would be some that might say, is there smoke to the NCAA investigation? Which I allude to it, but I don't think that's what this is. I think it's
I mean, there
someone.
always could be, but until we
Yeah,
have something happen,
yeah.
it's just gonna be said every time. It's like Matt Campbell is gonna be your new head coach. Until something happens, it's going to be said every time. So
Wait, I heard Matt Campbell was replacing Ryan Day. Is
yeah,
that
yeah.
is that happening?
No, not anymore.
January
Because
January 19th.
yeah, not anymore. Ryan Day beat Tennessee, Oregon, and Texas, so he's good.
Right.
But we'll
Right.
see if he loses to Notre Dame. What happens?
I think wildfires might go from California to Columbus. Which, by the
Yikes.
way, prayers for our listeners in LA. Prayers for everyone
Yes,
who is out there.
100%.
It's just devastating what's going on there.
It is.
Um, in all seriousness, I think what you're saying makes sense. Like I think Martindale, you have to be particularly gifted in many different things to be able to be a coordinator at a major college right now. And a lot of that's NIL, recruiting, retaining players after a year if they have a good year. And I just think if your heart isn't in it in terms of college and you're just like, I just want to coach ball, it's actually easier right now to be in the NFL because you don't have to, like, people have contracts they have to honor. Athletes don't have to honor contracts right now in college. Like, it's all collectives. It's all like all this. It's, again, the Wild Wild West. So I think it would make sense for that Martindale is thinking about going back to the NFL since that's where he cut his teeth. And like, I agree with you. I think Sharon Moore needs to have a short list of who's going to replace him if Martindale doesn't go this cycle.
Yeah, I mean, you look at this and essentially, like, this is a tough situation for Sharon Moore to be in. Sharon Moore, it was very good for him to be able to get Wink Martindale, somebody with a lot of experience. Maybe he wasn't in, college football for a long time, but obviously he was going to be able to bring a lot of experience with him, bring a system that Sharon Moore didn't really have to meddle in or anything like that. But, like, this is really where you see new head coaches really kind of go through the hardest times is hiring coordinators, hiring position staff, things like that. Now he just hired an offensive coordinator this offseason, so we'll see how that works out. But if he's going to go out and now try to hire a defensive coordinator, obviously he's going to have all the support in the world. He's going to have great connections with guys like Jim Harbaugh and John Harbaugh, stuff like that. But this is still the part of the job that can sometimes be the most difficult for first-year head coaches, especially somebody who came from the lower ranks and didn't really get a chance at a higher ranked school. Like Tom Allen before he went to Indiana was a defensive coordinator. I believe he was a defensive coordinator at Ole Miss. So you meet people, you grow, and you have connections. Sharon Moore, if I'm not mistaken, went straight from Central Michigan to Michigan, which turned out great for them, but that's also difficult for him to try and parse through who am I going to hire? Do I have connections? What kind of connections do I have that can, help me with other hirings, stuff like that. So it's a lot of hiring and a lot of turnover for a first year head coach coming out of his first year.
Yep. Yeah.
So, what do you think? Do you think Wink Martindale is gone this year, or do you think he sticks around for one more year? What are your thoughts?
I mean, I think I'm torn on it because there's another possibility where he is interviewing for jobs so that he can make an appeal for more money, right? It's like, hey, I got 3 teams that are interviewing me in the NFL. Can you up my pay a little bit because of what I did for you against Ohio State and Alabama? So I think that could be a possibility, but I would guess he is around for one more year, and then he's gone.
Yeah, I mean he had a really good finish to the year. Obviously, keeping Ohio State to 10 points, keeping Alabama to 13 points. Kalen DeBoer has always had very good offenses where he's been, but I don't know if the work throughout the entire season was enough. I do think that Wink Martindale is probably doing his best to get hired after this year because he's, I mean, just quite frankly, and I don't think Michigan fans disagree with me on this, but he's not going to have the same level of talent this coming year that he had before. I mean, he had 3 first-round picks on his defense this past year. Now,
Yep.
his best games came without Will Johnson on the team, and one of his best games in the Alabama game came without Mason Graham and Kenneth Grant skipped that game too, right? If I'm
Yep.
not mistaken.
Yep. Yeah. It was without most of their first string defensive line.
Right. So, there's always the possibility of things could get better because Wink has been in college longer and he has better feel for it and stuff. But I don't think you can disregard that kind of talent, right?
Yep.
I mean that
Yeah.
losing that kind of talent is just it's very, very difficult for a coordinator. But hats off to Wink Martindale. If he does come back and he's able to have a good defense again next year, that would be rather impressive. And I think if he does, he's almost certainly guaranteed a defensive coordinator job in the NFL. So
Yeah.
anything else on that, Zach, before we move on?
Nope. Nope.
All right. Penn State's next defensive coordinator. All right, so Tom Allen has gone to Clemson. He is on his, on his way. He changed his profile picture today and everything like that. So we're going to talk through some different possible defensive coordinator options for Penn State. If you are looking for somebody that's already on staff, one of the names that's been talked about the most is Anthony Poindexter. He is the safety coach right now, been there for a while. Some names of current defensive coordinators are Dan Lynn from USC, Joe Rossi from Michigan State, Tim Banks from Tennessee, Bryant Haynes from Indiana, and there are some other names that have been mentioned as well that are not currently defensive coordinators. And then finally, this one was my idea, Zach. I don't know if this would actually happen, but this is just all me. Pat Fitzgerald, former Northwestern head coach. Would he be interested to come and be the defensive coordinator for Penn State? I think that would be very interesting. Your thoughts?
So this is, I think, the pipe dream, but if I'm James Franklin, the first guy I go to is Al Golden. Penn State alum. He is right now maybe the best defensive coordinator or one of the top 3 defensive coordinators in the country. Like I go there immediately. He probably says no because I think what Marcus Freeman is building at Notre Dame is pretty special. And even if they don't win the national championship, which we'll talk about later in the show, I just think right now Notre Dame, like they're really building something special there. And if they don't win this year, I would almost bet, not that I'm a betting guy, but I would almost bet that Notre Dame wins a national championship in the next 5 years. Like I really think what Marcus Freeman is doing there is great. But I really like the Pat Fitzgerald idea, like big name, really good defensive minded guy, knows the league. My one concern there would be, will he be able to keep up with kind of the changes in college football with NIL and all that stuff? But like in terms of being fundamentally sound, he's very similar to Tom Allen in the sense that he's a former head coach who also can coach defense like nobody's business. And so I think that makes sense. Another guy, and I'd be curious, I don't know much about his philosophy, but if you want to go like the hot young coach route, Marcus Arroyo from Arizona State. Like I think, what he did against Texas, how he was able to defend against a better ranked team, what he did against Iowa State, which Iowa State offensively was pretty good this year. And I mean, they shut them down on defense in the Big 12 championship game. So again, you have to, I don't know Marcus Arroyo's defensive structure all that well. So I'm just more thinking about who's a good name out there. But Al Golden would be my home run hire if you could get him.
Yeah, no, that makes sense to me. Al Golden would definitely be one you have to call and just kind of gauge the interest, especially Penn State alum, the ability to come back there, and then obviously, I mean, I I don't know if this is attractive to coaches or not, but if the heat ever becomes too much for James Franklin and he decides to move on and go someplace else, you ingratiate yourself as enough as the defensive coordinator, and you could find yourself becoming the head coach.
Yep.
Now I don't know. Andy Kotelnicki might be kind of on that path right now, but he seems to be looking elsewhere for a job. He almost took the West Virginia job earlier this year, so that's always a possibility. But point is, Penn State just needs to find somebody that's going to stick around. This will be their third defensive coordinator hiring in the past 3 years. They had Manny Diaz. Manny Diaz left and went to Duke. Tom Allen. Tom Allen has left and gone to Clemson. Like they have got to find somebody who's going to stick around and be stable for them, which is difficult today because guys do like to move around. But if you can create good enough culture and you can create good enough stability for these guys, they are willing to stick around because there are some guys out there that just want to be defensive coordinators. They don't want to be head coaches. They don't want to deal with the NIL. They don't want to deal with all the stuff that's going on. They just want to draw up plays and blitzes and be a madman and tell kids, hey, go sack that quarterback. Like there is a certain aspect of what should I say? There's a certain aspect of comfort in that rather than trying to trying to be the head coach that has to deal with everything all the time. And Tom Allen has talked about it before. So
yeah.
All right, we're kind of moving right along here, Zach. Our last subject, and then we'll get to commercial. Can Penn State in 2025 win the national championship? Zach, they have a number of players returning. They have Drew Aller, Nick Singleton, Katron Allen, Denai Sutton, Zane Durant, Nick Dawkins, the center from this past year. Wheatley, the safety, is coming back. They've also lost a number of guys. Wormley just declared earlier before we came on. There, Abdul Carter. He went to the league, and then you've also lost a couple of wide receivers. Harrison Wallace is in the transfer portal. Amari Evans, I believe is his name. I'm getting confused with Amari Kelly. I think he's a transfer that went to Michigan State.
Yeah.
But Evans, I think he was the wide receiver, the really speedy guy.
Yep, he's in the portal. Yeah.
Okay. Obviously, Julian Fleming, he's run out of eligibility, so he won't be able to come back for Penn State. So you're seeing this exodus from the wide receiver position, but you're also seeing the quarterback, the running backs, and offensive linemen, the defensive line coming back for next year. Is Penn State loading up similar to how Michigan did in 2023 and how Ohio State did in 2024? Is it Penn State's time to load up and make a national championship run, Zach?
Not unless they get some more key pieces. I think they're loaded up for a run for the Big Ten and to win the Big Ten championship game. But I think to win a national championship, you've got to be a team that can win in multiple ways. And I think we've seen that with Ohio State. We've seen that with Notre Dame. The reality with Penn State is they are not explosive in the throw game. And listen, Hudson is a fine wide receiver coming in, but they're losing their best tight end. I know Dinkins they're high on, but they're losing Tyler Warren. They're losing Amari Evans, who I thought came on a bit as a deep play guy. But I think part of it too is I really expected Drew Aller to be better than he was. And I think we both thought that he had improved quite a bit. But at the end of the day, seeing him against a really good defense against Notre Dame, I was left underwhelmed. And I just look at the returning cast and I'm like, I think they have the right idea, but I just don't believe they can beat you in multiple ways. And to me, I think they will be, again, a top 5 to 8 team. I think they can win the Big Ten because I think in a one-off, I think they can win the game. But I think if you're saying, hey, they're going to win 3 or 4 playoff games against top 8 teams in succession. I don't think they're built for that right now.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think they are right now either, but I also look back at the Michigan team. I also look back at this Ohio State team. They had holes as well. It wasn't a finished product just by the guys coming back, right? Ohio State needed to go out and get a quarterback. They needed to go out and get another running back. They were able to get Will Howard. They were able to get Quinshon Judkins. I guess for me, the biggest thing is like, is Penn State going to rally enough of the NIL for them to get the wide receivers that they need, for them to get the safeties to replace Kevin Winston and Jalen Reed. Wheatley obviously, comes in as a good returner. He had a good year this year coming in to replace Kevin Winston Jr., but they're going to need somebody back there with them. Are they going to be able to get the linebackers? So there are still holes on this team, but you ask me, like, Dennis Sutton is a really good defensive end. Zane Durant is a really good defensive tackle. Like, you have the stars to make a run for a national championship. The question is, are you going to find the players to go around them? And then also, Zach, you and I alluded to this a little bit when we were going through the Penn State Notre Dame game, but do they also have the coaches? Because right now, I looked up their entire coaching staff, Zach. Nobody on their coaching staff currently has any NFL coaching experience. Nobody. Obviously, the NFL is not the end-all be-all, but I think in order to do things in a more professional way, which I think it's going to take professionalism for these teams to win in college football, to win it all more often than not. Obviously, there will be times when it doesn't happen, but more often than not, you need that professionalism. So if they're not going to have somebody on staff or a number of coaches on staff that have that NFL experience, obviously they have coaches who played in the NFL, but that coached in the NFL, I'm looking at that and saying this might not be the best situation, or not the best situation. This might not be a situation that is geared up and ready to win a national championship. Because what do we know about James Franklin? James Franklin loves to give guys chances. He loves to bring in young guys, put them on his staff, and have them go on and go elsewhere, which is awesome. I think that's great that James Franklin does that. But in a situation like this, Jim Harbaugh had a very experienced staff at Michigan when they won it all. Ohio State has a very experienced staff on their run to possibly win it all now, and with just one more game. I think you need more experienced guys, and I think you need some guys with NFL coaching experience as well.
Yeah. Well, and especially the format now, right? Like you have to, I think that's what has made Ohio State so dangerous is they were preparing back in the summer what would a 16 or 17 game schedule be like for their players, which is why they went out and got Judkins, right? Because you didn't need another running back for a 12 game schedule. But for a 16 game schedule to keep Travion Henderson fresh, and we've seen how fresh both he and Judkins have been in this playoff run. So here's my other question, because I'm assuming Abdul Carter declared. And
yeah, he declared immediately after.
Yeah. And Tyler Warren is gone.
He ran out of eligibility, yes.
Yeah. My question, because I agree with you, like Dennis Sutton is really good. Zane Durant's really good. I think Singleton is one of the most explosive backs in the country. So as I ask this question, I'm not asking it from a point of ignorance that they do have some game breakers, but who is a guy that can really wreck a game plan on Penn State right now?
I mean, defensively, Dennis Sutton, Zane Durant.
But were they complementary pieces to Abdul Carter, or were they game wreckers in their own right?
I don't think so. I think in the run game, they were the better pieces. I think Abdul Carter was, one of the best pass rushers in all of college football, but I think he left a little bit to be desired in the run game, which, I mean, that often happens, and that's what the NFL wants. They want, specialized pass rushers more often than not. So I'm not knocking him by saying that. I'm just saying that's the player I believe he was in college. Who knows? Things might change when he gets to the NFL. But, yeah, I mean, I don't think Denied Dennis Sutton is going to be that pass rushing level of Abdul Carter, but at the same time, he might be just as good as an overall player as Abdul Carter, well rounded, if that makes sense.
That's
But
fair.
they definitely don't have anybody on offense though. They don't have a Tyler Warren on offense right now.
Yeah. I think that's I'm thinking back to Michigan in particular 2 years ago, and I'm like, the thing that set Michigan apart, insert cheating jokes. But in all seriousness, the thing that set Michigan apart from every other team was they had game wreckers everywhere. Like Mason Graham, Kenneth Grant, I think Chris Jenkins. That's just your defensive tackle rotation. And they were monsters. And they had a fourth guy in that rotation too that I'm blanking on. You had Will Johnson as a corner. And you had other guys in that secondary who were just beasts. And then JJ McCarthy, as much as we maligned him, like for what he could do at the quarterback position for Michigan, he was a game breaker. Blake Corum was really good and like at times was a game breaker. Guys on that offensive line would just mash you and maul you. And what that did was then it gave other guys who were more role players, it elevated them. So guys like Roman Wilson, who is a very good receiver in his own right, but like he was never going to be like he's good. Cornelius Johnson's good. So my question, I think my thought is, do I think Penn State could get there? Yes. But I'm like, man, I don't know. Like, I think what they're trying to do is great. I am just skeptical right now to put them in that same tier as 2023 Michigan and 2024 Ohio State. I think they're trying to follow the same blueprint, but like you need more. And Joe is talking about Luke Reynolds, who's going to take over for Tyler Warren. And I think great. Like I can always count on Penn State to have a great to elite tight end. Like they are just so good at producing at that position, but you need more than that. And I think that's my concern.
I mean, I'm not trying to be rude to the tight end position here, but is a tight end really a game wrecker?
Oh, it can be. I mean, this is going NFL, but Travis Kelce.
Yeah, I mean, Travis Kelce, sure. I guess my point would be there's not that many tight ends that are game wreckers. Tyler Warren obviously was exceptional, an elite tight end, best tight end in the country in my mind. But I like to just expect another guy like Tyler Warren's don't just grow on trees. Like I get what you're saying here, Joe, that Luke Reynolds was just as good. And John's pointing out Brock Bowers, but like, those guys don't just grow on trees. Those guys, they are generational talents in a lot of ways. Luke Reynolds might end up being just as good as Tyler Warren. It's obviously possible, but sometimes I think we have a player on our team and we think, oh, the coaching staff produced this player, so they can produce another one just like him. And it's like, they might be able to, but there's also a lot more that goes into it than just development. There's mentality, there's physical gifts, and everything else. Like you look at Colson Loveland this past year at Michigan. Going into the year, everybody said, "Oh yeah, Marlon Klein is just as good as Colson Loveland." He's very athletic, but he didn't have the experience of Colson Loveland. He didn't have the same production as Colson Loveland, and when Colson Loveland went down, that production didn't increase to the Colson Loveland level. So, but I see what you're saying, Joe. I'm not trying to disregard what you're saying. I'm just, to me, it takes a very, very special player to be a game wrecker at tight end. One of the best players in the country, if not the best player in the country. And that's hard.
I was going to say, and to be fair to Joe, he's not arguing that the tight end, like having the tight end.
No, I know. I'm just, that's where we were coming from.
Yeah.
He also asked if Wallace declared. I don't think we said he declared it. He went to the portal.
Portal. Yeah.
And Wallace is not worth $1 million. If he thinks he's getting that, he's crazy. OSU is the only team that proved they can win it all with a store-bought team this year. PSU was impressive. I think only Franklin can pull it off. I mean, yeah, Ohio State didn't have the most expensive team in the country though, and the two other more expensive teams they beat. So I
Yep.
yeah,
I
I mean
I
they
think
obviously spent
there's
$20 million. That's a lot.
yeah, but I think people and first of all, I think what Penn State did accomplish this year and what they're trying to do for next year, it's great. Like, and
Yeah,
so
this
me
is what they should
saying,
be doing.
yeah,
Yeah,
they should be doing it. By me saying no, I'm giving my honest thought and analysis, but I think they're going to be formidable. Like I think they are the favorite right now heading into the Big Ten for the conference. Like I think Oregon, Ohio State, is obviously going to be in there. Um,
did you know their win total is only 9.5 right now?
Penn State's.
Penn State right now on FanDuel has the same win total as Michigan did this past year.
There's more that I'd love to break down because right now Ohio State's the favorite for next year, and I don't buy that at all. But I do want to say something about the store bought because it comes up a lot, and the reality is, yes, they certainly paid money for some of those guys, but a lot of that was for player retention. And like they cherry picked a few great players, and part of that was getting Jeremiah Smith to commit. That wasn't just money though. Like that was, I think, the chance to work with Brian Hartline. But like you're talking about retaining guys like Jack Sawyer and JT Tui Moloau. And, we saw the play that Jack Sawyer made to win the Texas game. And so you're trying to retain talent and keep a culture together and take care of your guys. It's not just going out and spending $5 million in Caleb Downs.
Yeah, I mean, there's a narrative out there that Ohio State bought their entire roster from the transfer portal. If you say that, I just know that you don't pay attention to, all of college football, which is fine. Not everybody does. But they got 7 guys out of the portal. Not even all of them are starting this year. And the majority of their money, as you said, and Michael is pointing out here that, was spent on player retention, which, I mean, people want to crap on it, but I'm like, this is what NIL should be, right? Like, don't we want to be keeping great players in college football? Don't we want to be seeing more talent, more ability? Like, I think it's probably one of the reasons why we saw better defense this season than we saw offense, because there are so many more offensive players drafted at the beginning of the draft when you make more money. So obviously those offensive players are going to leave sooner. Now you have a bunch of defensive players that are like, well, I wasn't going to get drafted until the second round. I can make almost as much money as I was going to make drafted in the second round in college. So they stick around, which
It's good.
Again, we should want that. But that's just me. Maybe other people don't want it. Or maybe they only want it for their team. They don't want it for other teams. That's probably more accurate. All right. We're going to talk about this Notre Dame-Ohio State game. Before we do that, we are going to get a commercial break. So we will do a commercial, and then we'll come back. We'll talk about Ohio State, Notre Dame. Have you ever wanted to watch all 22 film, that film the coaches watch? Well, now you can. Introducing the Coaches Film Room. Over at Minutes to Sports, former college coach Zach Smith breaks down film of the most relevant teams in college football with a bit of a Big Ten lead. It's not free, so you'll need to sign up for the Colonel tier, which is $25 a month, but I can attest to you that it is far more worth it than that. With about 4 to 8 games per week, this is worth so much more money, not to mention Zach's analysis, making you a smarter football fan. Go check it out. The links are in the description, minutestosports.com. You won't be sorry. Back here on the Big Ten Huddle, we do appreciate you being with us. I'm hiding behind the graphic here. I will bring myself back over. There I am. Here I am. And we want to ask that you would please like and subscribe. That always helps us out when you do that. And if you have any thoughts after the show or anything like that, if you're watching this late, please do comment. We love to hear your thoughts and get your feelings as well. Do you think Penn State is a national championship contender in 2025? Do you think they have holes that need to be filled? What holes do you think need to be filled? And do you have any thoughts on Wake Martindale, Jonte Cook, those situations as well? Zach, we do have a national championship game coming up in less than a week. Ryan Day and Marcus Freeman, they faced the past 2 seasons. Now they are facing again in the national championship. Ohio State fans thought they were done with Notre Dame fans. Notre Dame fans thought they were done with Ohio State fans for a little while. But Marcus Freeman has done the improbable. He has brought Notre Dame back to a national championship game. It's been over 10 years since they've been there. It's been 10 years since Ohio State won their last national championship. Marcus Freeman has just done a spectacular job. Ohio State is favored in this one by 8.5. They was originally favored by 9.5. So obviously the money is coming in. People are confident that Notre Dame can make this a closer game, or at least very well win it outright. We'll see what happens. But Zach, I'm curious with all the talk about Ohio State and their talent discrepancy and everything else, are there any key matchups that you see in this game that you think people watching it need to be paying attention to?
Yeah, I think there's a few. One is, I was listening to PFF a little bit earlier today. They're really high on Leonard Moore on the defensive back for Notre Dame. He's a true freshman. They were saying that if Jeremiah Smith is going to be the number one overall pick, or at least the number one wide receiver in the 2027 draft, that Leonard Moore might be the number one corner in that draft, the way he's playing. And the way they play man defense, Marcus Freeman hinted that they'll probably mix up coverage a little bit. But I think Leonard Moore on whoever he's guarding, that's a key matchup I'm really excited to watch, because I think as I first kind of thought about this matchup, I'm like, I think Ohio State wide receivers are going to overwhelm Notre Dame. That's actually not my view anymore. Like, I think these defensive backs will hold their own in man coverage. I think that like each team will win some, but with that being said, I think the beneficiary of that in particular is going to be Emeka Egbuka. If you look at the past 2 games that Ohio State has played against Notre Dame, they had Marvin Harrison in those games. Marvin Harrison was fairly quiet in both of those games. Emeka Egbuka was not. He's had at least 90 receiving yards in both of those games, had a touchdown his sophomore year, and had a big play to set up the game-winning touchdown a year ago. And so I think Christian Gray is also a really good corner. I think I'm just curious about those matchups, but I think Emeka Egbuka and probably Carnell Tate will be able to have some favorable matchups at times. I also expect Chip Kelly to move Jeremiah Smith around, but I do think that that's going to be maybe one of the most fun matchups is the defensive backs. Xavier Watts also is an All-American safety back there versus those wide receivers. I think that's a matchup. I think the other matchup that I think really favors Ohio State is, I think, as maligned as Ohio State's offensive line has been, I think this run defense for Notre Dame is, I won't say mediocre. I don't think it's great. Like they allow over 133 yards. They gave up over 200 rush yards to Penn State without a pass game, by the way. Like, no receivers threatened them, no catches. And they still ran for over 200 yards, averaged a little under 5 yards a carry on them. And my question then is, if they are able to run the ball, how does that change their pass defense? And so I think those are a couple of questions. Those are all on offense. The reason why I'm not mentioning the defense is this is an awful matchup for Notre Dame in terms of their offense against Ohio State's defense. And the key to the game is, will Jeremiah Love and Kadarian Price, will they be able to run the ball and get explosive runs on this rush defense, which is allowed only 62 yards a game in the playoff?
I don't see how Notre Dame's offense is going to be able to score consistently in this game. Really, the only team in the playoffs that they were able to put long drives together against was Indiana. And Indiana, their offense didn't move the ball hardly at all, and the defense for Indiana got tired, and Notre Dame was just able to move the ball on them, and obviously Notre Dame also was healthier back then. For me, like Notre Dame has a very quick passing game, and that's where they kind of do most of their work. They do their best when guys are speaking of PFF. I was listening to, I believe, that same show as well, and they were talking about how Ohio State doesn't have to bring a blitz to get pressure on this Notre Dame offensive line. Well, Notre Dame, they do their best passing work when the other team blitzes because Riley Leonard is just very, very good, and the offensive line is very, very good at figuring out where the blitz is coming from, if the other team is blitzing, and where the holes are going to be. So they oftentimes throw those quick shots to guys. I don't know if I see that working on this Ohio State team. Obviously, if we can tell, and PFF can tell that Riley Leonard is much better against the blitz than just a 4-man rush, Ohio State's going to be able to tell that. And if you have Ohio State's big physical corners and press coverage against these Notre Dame wide receivers that, we'll talk about Great House here in a second, but they're not the best wide receiver group out there. I don't know how they're going to be able to pass the ball consistently. And if you can't pass the ball consistently and this run defense for Ohio State is as good as they are, you're not going to get many first downs, and you're going to be on the field longer or shorter, which is going to put your defense out on the field longer, and it's going to be frustrating for them. Another key for me is, can Notre Dame run their man coverage? You're talking about Leonard. To me, it's the entire secondary, because even if we saw what happened against Texas, even if you can take Jeremiah Smith away, which is a big task to be able to do that, you still got Carnell Tate, you still got Emeka Buka. These guys are also very talented wide receivers. To me, Notre Dame has a very good secondary, but I don't think any team in the country can stay on these guys in man coverage all game. I just don't think any secondary can, because this wide receiver group is too talented. And I don't think Notre Dame has faced a good wide receiver group this year. I mean, what team that they faced this year had a good wide receiver group? Indiana's probably the best one with Elijah Surratt and those guys. I mean, Louisville, maybe. USC,
I was going to say, I think
they were a little underwhelming this year.
I was going to say USC and Louisville, but I think to your point, they struggled in both of those games defensively.
Yeah, they gave 35 to USC, 8 minutes left in the fourth quarter. USC was down by a touchdown, and they were in the red zone.
Yep.
Notre Dame got a pick, and I think it was a pick 6 in that one. And then USC drove the field again, and they were getting ready to score, and then they got another pick 6. So USC had the opportunities in that game late to be able to, win the game, but obviously Jaden Maiava and Notre Dame did what their defense is so good at, which is getting takeaways, which I don't think can be understated in this one either, with how Will Howard has not always done a great job protecting the ball. He's good for at least one interception every game, it seems like. And then I have some other keys as well, and I'll go through these quicker. Notre Dame's defensive line, can they stop the run in this game? They're undersized. They've done, an admirable job against Georgia and Penn State and Indiana. But like you said, one of the reasons why Penn State didn't get more yardage is because Andy Kotelnicki went away from it. He went to passing the ball more in a game where Drew Aller was struggling, which was unfortunate. I think they should have kept running the ball. And they really got incredible push on the defensive line in the first half. Now, Notre Dame made adjustments in the second half that helped, but I mean, that offensive line for Penn State was getting pushed 2 or 3 yards down the field before the running back was even hitting the line of scrimmage. So, And then the last one is Riley Leonard using his legs. Ohio State has knocked out, by my count, if you count Arch Manning, which I don't know if you do or not, felt like there was obvious times in that game when he could have came back in, but Arch Manning, he got hit by Lathan Ransom, and he got up slow, and he didn't come in the rest of the game.
Yeah.
Did he just get up slow and he was fine? Felt like you could have used him on the goal line down there when you were doing stuff and late in that game, and they never put him in. So was he out? They knocked out several quarterbacks in the out-of-conference, or a couple quarterbacks in the out-of-conference. They knocked out other ones as well. Like, Ohio State has knocked out 4 or 5 quarterbacks this season. If Riley Leonard's not careful, he's he's going to find himself on the sideline again. Not intentionally. Ohio
No.
State is not out there headhunting, and I'm not vying for anybody to be headhunting, but it's just the nature of it all, where if you run your quarterback, you run that risk, and Ohio State's a team that's not afraid to hit the quarterback hard.
Yep. This game is so hard to – it's hard because I think Notre Dame has a lot of good players. But it's similar to what I was just saying about Penn State, where it's like they have a really good team and they deserve all their flowers. And I think the pathway for a Notre Dame victory is they turn you over, they do well on special teams, and they play fundamentally sound. Like that's their pathway to victory. And in a sense, they hope that you beat yourselves. And that's what they've done the past couple weeks, right? Like Georgia kind of self-imploded and made some dumb mistakes, and they capitalized on it, right? In the middle eight, they went from, I was just listening to Pate a little bit before we came on here, but they went from 3 to 3 to 20 to 3 from because of the middle eight. And that's because of a turnover and special teams. So 17-point swing, right? And that's huge. And like with Penn State, they turned a Drew Aller interception into a game-winning field goal. So they let you beat yourselves. And like Ohio State, this last game, 9 penalties, 75 yards. So like the path, like there's a pathway for Notre Dame to win this game. And I think everybody saw Ohio State's sputtering this past week. And I think that's why, honestly, people are betting the line down, is because, yeah, like Notre Dame's really good. And yeah, they beat Georgia. And yeah, they have a really tough team. I think here's the reality. If Ohio State plays their B- game and Notre Dame plays their A game, Notre Dame loses by at least 2 scores. That doesn't mean that Notre Dame can't win. And I'm not saying Notre Dame's a bad team. I'm just saying you have to bank on a bad game by Ohio State,
which is not sustainable, right?
Yep.
We'll do past the victory in just a second. Let's do our other question that you wanted to get to last episode. We'll hit that really fast, and then we'll do past the victory for Notre Dame, because I do think there are too many people counting Notre Dame out and saying there's no way they win this game. But I do think Notre Dame has passed the victory in this game, albeit not the best pass, but I think there are some pass. So your question that you wanted to get to last time, there's been a lot of talk about Notre Dame's injuries and the talents difference between Ohio State and Notre Dame. Are there any players on Notre Dame's team that would be good enough to replace an Ohio State starter? Now, this sounds like a very disrespectful question, but I promise you go through and try to do it yourself. There might be a linebacker. I believe his name is Kaiser for
Jack
Notre
Kaiser.
Dame. That could possibly start. You could talk about Xavier Watts as a possible starter. My only one that I would say for sure, obviously those other guys, like I said, you could make arguments for them, I believe. But the only one for me for sure I would say is Mitchell Evans, the tight end. His ability, what he does in the blocking game, what he does in the receiving game, his contested catch rate. He has the 3rd highest contested catch rate among tight ends in college football that have gotten at least 10 contested catch targets or more. And that's another way that Notre Dame can possibly beat Ohio State in this game. If Riley Leonard throws the ball up to him and Jaden Greathouse, who has the 2nd highest wide receiver contested catch rate in all of college football, that's another avenue there. So, but Mitchell Evans would be my pick. Do you have anybody else, or do you agree with Mitchell Evans?
Yeah, I think Evans is I wouldn't say is decidedly better than Ohio State's tight ends, but I think he's been more productive. He's been more consistent.
I think he's overall all around better than all of Ohio State's tight ends. Yeah. Ohio State plugs their tight ends in different spots and does different things. Like G. Scott's the receiver, Will Kazmarik's the blocker, Jelani Thurman's more of a blocker, kind of jumbo set guy. But if you look at overall player, I think Mitchell Evans is better than any of Ohio State's tight ends.
I'd agree with that. I think there is an argument to say when he's healthy, Jeremiah Love is the more complete back. I think I'd be curious to see Henderson get a full seat, like be a primary back, or Judkins a primary back, and part of it could be the offensive line. But I do think Love, like he's got a first round grade for next year's draft on him, and I'm not sure that Henderson or I think Henderson and Judkins are probably more second, third round guys right now. I think Henderson could work his way up into first round. But I think Love, I think he's certainly in the rotation at Ohio State if he's at Ohio State. Like there's no keeping him off the field. He's really good. I think you could possibly say Rocco Spindler at one of the guard spots, but he may not play. But it's and Xavier Watts taking a safety spot. As much as I love Lathan Ransom, although I did look up at our lad, Xavier Watts and Caleb Downs, I think technically play the same position, but they moved
that doesn't
Downs.
Always mean you can't move somebody over. I'd still take Ransom over Watts if it were me, but I understand. I understand what you're seeing there.
Yeah, and I think you could make a case for Howard Cross over Ty Hamilton.
Yeah, but he's not playing in the game, right?
Is Cross not playing?
I thought Cross wasn't playing.
Make sure, Riley Mills isn't playing.
Riley Mills is not.
Yeah. The other corner, I would say I would pick Leonard Moore over either Igbinosun or Burke.
You would take Leonard Moore over Igbinosun and Burke?
Igbinosun or Burke. Like if you put him in one of the corner spots over them. But again, it's like it's shades, right?
Right.
And part of that I think is probably more potential, but he's playing really well right now.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I could take Leonard Moore possibly. I don't know. I think I'd still take Burke or Igbinosun, especially with how Igbinosun's been playing lately. Now, you asked me earlier in the year when Igbinosun was holding on every single play. I'd probably answer you differently, but at least for now. So, all right, let me look up really fast Howard Cross. Go ahead and give me your path to victory for Notre Dame while I look up Howard Cross.
I mean, it's very Tressel-like, right? And I think ironically, I think people bring up the 2002 national championship game with Miami and Ohio State. No one gave Ohio State a shot to win that game. I think it's a similar thing where Notre Dame really has to muck things up, right? Like they have to make it a slugfest. They force turnovers. They really confuse Will Howard. They get a lot of pressure. And they're able to get pressure with 4. And I think Ohio State self-implodes a little bit, right? They have, Travion throws another punch, or there's a targeting penalty to Caleb Downs, like something like that. That's catastrophic. I think that, and I think that's on the table, right? Like you can get a targeting. The way targeting is officiated, you never know. And so
yeah, I mean, Sark wanted a targeting just for the body blow that Sonny Styles put on the
well, that was just dumb. My player's hurt, throw a flag. No. But I think that's some of the pathway to win is that Ohio State, they force Ohio State to self-implode, which is not out of the realm of possibility because we've seen it. And that's why I'm nervous about this game. You asked me before we went on the air, are you nervous about this game? And I said, yes. And the reason is because I've seen Ryan Day do it. Now, That's not me saying that I think Ryan Day will do it in this game, but I think if you're sitting here and you're like, oh, Ohio State's definitely going to blow this team out, I think from an X's and O's perspective, possibly. But I also think the way that Notre Dame beats you is they are too darn smart to make mistakes. And that counts for something.
Yeah, I think this game is either a 2-score or more win for Ohio State or a close win for Notre Dame. Obviously, the 2-score or more win for Ohio State is more likely. But if this gets down to a close game, I think Marcus Freeman has proved himself.
Yeah.
He proved it against Penn State.
Yeah.
He proved it, in some ways against Georgia. But I think this Notre Dame team is going to be better in a close game at the end of the game than Ohio State will, personally. Because if it gets to that point, not to say that like Ohio State's the worst team, but just if it gets to that point, that means Ohio State's been making mistakes all game. That's allowed it to get to that point. Howard Cross does look like he's going to play against Ohio State. He tweaked his ankle in the Georgia game, and then the question was, which I was still remembering before the Penn State game. I thought I read it after, but I looked back up what I had seen, and it was before the Penn State game, saying he might play, and they were going to see how much he played. Well, he played nearly 60 snaps, so he's fine.
Yeah.
He'll be fine. So sorry about that. My path to victory for Notre Dame in this one, I have goals they have to achieve in order to make this happen. And I think they have to achieve all 4 of these goals. You can tell me how likely you think it is that they achieve all 4 of these goals, but I don't think they can just achieve 1 or 2 of these. I think they have to achieve all 4, and some of them are out of their control. Ohio State has to commit 5 or more penalties in this game. Both sides of the ball, it has to be 5 or more. They have to go over what their normal average is, and they have to essentially implode with penalties, possibly 6 or more. Notre Dame has to get at least 2 turnovers in this game, and they cannot turn the ball over. So they need to lead the turnover margin by at least 2. Preferably, you would have 2 or more and not turn the ball over. They need a special teams touchdown or some kind of big special teams play, like a blocked punt or a blocked field goal of some kind. If it's a blocked field goal, it would be preferred that you take it back and kind of give your offense a shorter field. But there needs to be some kind of special teams play like that. Kickoff return, punt return, blocked field goal. Ohio State almost let Texas have a punt return. A forced fumble was what saved it. But it's possible to do to Ohio State. It almost happened. And then finally, Ohio State, they have to score 17 or less points. Even with a pick 6 in this game, I don't see Notre Dame scoring more than 1 touchdown.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe a field goal with that, but I just think Ohio State's defense is too good and Notre Dame's offense isn't good enough. If they're going to score, it's going to be maybe 1 drive that they go the entire field and score. But they're going to have to play the field position battle. They're going to have to take advantage of turnovers. They're going to have to take advantage of bad punts, which Ohio State has done. Ohio State has had a 20-yard punt. And that's essentially what Michigan did in their game. So I don't think the Michigan game plan is exactly what Notre Dame can do. I don't think they have that kind of defensive line to be able to do that to Ohio State. I think they need to run the field game battle. They need to be content with playing conservative and not turning the ball over. But then on defense, they need to be aggressive, try to get the turnovers, and when they try to get the turnovers, they can't have big plays that happen instead. They have to convert. So,
yep.
What is your? Or good.
I was going to say.
I asked you how likely they work. So go ahead.
I honestly, aside from the 17 points, I think 3 out of 4 of those are actually very feasible.
I think they're all possible.
Yeah. The only reason why I say I don't think 17, and it's just what you said. I don't love their defensive line without Riley Mills. And while Ohio State has struggled to run the ball, they have mostly struggled to run the ball against stout defensive lines, right? They struggled against Nebraska. But you know who they didn't struggle with? Penn State. They didn't struggle with Penn State. And Penn State has a pretty good defensive line. We just got done talking about them. And they ran the rock down their throats, especially at the end of the game. Like they proved they could play a physical brand of football. They couldn't run against Mason Graham and Kenneth Grant. And they couldn't run against a really, really stout Texas defensive line. That's not Notre Dame's greatest strength.
And a really fresh defensive line too, because of how much Texas would rotate those guys. Yeah. That was another thing of how it worked out so much for them.
Yeah. And that's, so I think the way I think about this game, a lot of people are like, maybe it's 2002 Ohio State, Miami, but roles are reversed. I actually think it's going to be more like 2014 Ohio State, Oregon. because I think Ohio State's going to self-inflict some wounds because I think Notre Dame's really good at it. And I think people will be like, what the heck is going on with Ohio State? And I think Henderson, Judkins, and Ibuka have big games. So here are my 4 predictions. Henderson goes over 1,000 yards in this game, like for the season. Judkins goes over 1,000 yards for the season. Egbuka sets the career mark in receiving yards. And Ohio State wins 28-10.
I'm not far off from you. We typically are not too far off when we're doing these. I think that Ohio State and Notre Dame are close. I can see it being something like 10-3 at halftime. I think Ryan Day is too obsessed with the middle 8 to allow something like what happened against Georgia to happen, where turnover and then Notre Dame gets a quick score or anything like that. I think that Ohio State is going to put the emphasis on their special teams. I don't see a kick return touchdown or something like that happening, but you never know. It could happen. And I think Notre Dame's offense struggles, and I think they score late to make it 24-10, and I think Ohio State wins.
Yep.
So
Yeah.
I think like the Texas game, I think it'll be relatively close for a good amount of time, and then eventually Ohio State will kind of pull away. Middle of the third quarter will be like 17-3. There will be an opportunity for kind of Notre Dame to turn it around and see if they can make it happen. But Ohio State will stop it, and then they'll go down the field and score again.
Yeah. I'll say one more thing. It'll be like if Notre Dame can stay within a score, that's the danger zone for Ohio State. But if Ohio State gets up 14, I would almost guarantee it's over.
Penn State actually could. Notre Dame cannot come back from 14-0.
Yeah.
Even if Ohio State doesn't score the rest of the game, I'm fairly confident that unless there are some big pick sixes and a kick return touchdown or something like that, I don't think Notre Dame could come back from 14-0.
Yeah.
So, all right, Zach, let's do one more commercial. We'll come back and we'll do our hot seat talk. We'll talk about the hot seat tiers that you and I made. We have some differences. We're pretty similar, but we have some differences. We will go through and talk about them all.
Nice.
Home Field is your go-to destination for premium collegiate apparel with a passion for comfort and a flair for vintage design. Home Field brings you gear that is comfortable and stylish. With over 150 colleges to choose from, Home Field digs deep into the archives, uncovering forgotten logos, iconic mascots, and legendary moments to create one-of-a-kind apparel. Use my code TBTH for 15% off for new customers, or use my link in the description. Back here on the Big Ten Huddle, we do appreciate you being with us. We also are available on podcast as well, so if you miss an episode live and you just want to listen, maybe not see what's actually going on, you are more than welcome to go onto the podcast feed and listen there as well. All right, Zach, our hot seat coaches tiers for the Big Ten. I'll be honest, I had some areas where I could have gone back and forth with a few guys, but I will go ahead, if anybody's listening on podcasts, that I will read them off, and then you and I can kind of discuss maybe some of the differences, and then maybe some of the guys that we thought could have been here, could have been there, and then obviously if there's any reactions from the chat, we will get to that as well. My Please Never Leave tier is Brett Bielema, Kirk Cinetti, Dan Lanning. My Keep Up the Good Work tier is Greg Schiano, Sharon Moore, PJ Fleck, and Ryan Day. Not happy but not mad for me is Jonathan Smith, Jed Fish, Barry Odom, David Braun, Matt Rule, James Franklin, and Kirk Ferentz. The It's Getting Bad tier is Lincoln Riley and Deshaun Foster. And then my In Trouble tier is Mike Loxley and Luke Fickell. Zach, your list, similar to mine. The Please Never Leave tier is Brett Bielema, Kirk Cinetti. The Keep Up the Good Work is Dan Lanning, Greg Schiano, Sharon Moore, PJ Fleck, and Ryan Day. The Not Happy But Not Mad tier is Deshaun Foster, Jonathan Smith, Jed Fish, Barry Odom, David Braun, Matt Rule, James Franklin, Kirk Ferentz, and then your It's Getting Bad tier is Lincoln Riley and Luke Fickell, and then your In Trouble tier is just one Mike Loxley. Zach, you and I differ on Dan Lanning. I have him one above. I have him in the Please Never Leave tier. You have him down in the Keep Up the Good Work tier. I have Deshaun Foster down in the It's Getting Bad tier. and you have Luke Fickell in the it's getting bad tier. So, what are some differences here you want to point out and talk about?
I mean, I think, I think the differences, I think, are probably a little. I mean, I think they're probably just feel right. Like I have Luke Fickell in the it's getting bad because it's getting bad, but like Mike Loxley should be fired as of like 3 years ago. Um, Luke Fickell, I think, gets another year. So I'm like, there should just be a Mike Loxley tier, in my opinion. And Luke Fickell isn't there yet in my mind. But I would agree that you could argue that he, you know, maybe should have gotten fired this year. So I don't
I
think
think
it's
I
that
think you got to
bad.
give them. I think you got to give them one chance to redo their coordinator hire, which
Yeah,
I
no,
think I think
I
is what
agree
was.
with that.
Yeah, I think that's what Wisconsin is doing right now. Wisconsin is saying, Luke, you did not get the offensive coordinator hire right with Phil Longo. We will give you one more year, or at least a year and a half, possibly 2 years,
Yeah.
to hire another coordinator, see how it goes. But I think honestly, if Luke Fickell goes 5-7 again, possibly even 6-6, which is actually quite possible with how hard that schedule is, I don't think Luke Fickell is the coach the year after that.
Yeah. I yeah, so I mean, I think it is getting bad. I don't know if he's like in trouble, but I agree with you. I think it's teetering. Um Deshaun Foster, and I'm curious to hear your thoughts. I It wasn't a great year out in LA. They're in LA if you didn't know. Um
I heard
but
that someplace.
yeah, but I thought Deshaun Foster had a nice run close to the end of the season. And so I'm like, it's certainly people are certainly not happy, but I'm like, I don't know if they're like they're super like this is like doomsday scenario because of what the expectations were. Um, but like I can understand why you would put them in it's getting bad. And then I think probably the biggest one, I feel like with Dan Lanning and Ryan Day, I think Dan Lanning was in the please never leave category up until the Rose Bowl, and then they got blitzed. And I'm like, yeah, like I think there was a lot of hope that Oregon would get the 0 out of the national title column this year. And instead they lost by 20 and it should have been worse. And so I think it's very much like in the middle for me. Like please never leave and keep up the good work. But I do think that's something that will be in the craw of Oregon fans like for a while. And then for Ryan Day, if he wins a national championship, it is please never leave.
So I'll start with Deshaun Foster. I have felt like ever since he was hired, that Deshaun Foster might have a little bit of a shorter leash than maybe a normal first year head coach hire, just because I think UCLA's options were very thin when it came time to hire,
Mm-hmm.
unfortunately. And I think they saw a guy that was an alumni who had good relations and somebody that people trusted to, stabilize the program for a little bit. He doesn't have any head coaching experience. He doesn't have that much even coaching experience. So for him to take the job as a first year head coach, I don't know. Maybe it's just me, but I have a feeling like that UCLA, administration is kind of looking at the situation like, okay, we're going to give Deshaun a year or two, but if things don't go well, we're not going to feel bad to, cut bait or, say, hey, maybe you go back to the running back position, coach again, and we hire somebody else.
Yeah.
So for me, like, that's kind of where I'm at with it. We're like, it's getting bad. You can't have another season like this again where you only win, what was it, 2 Big 10 games or 3? Was it 2 or 3?
I thought it was 3, wasn't it?
Okay. Yeah. Where you only win 3 Big 10 games. We're getting into the conference. We need to do better than this. But that's also implying that UCLA has high expectations for their football program. They may not. Still learning about UCLA. So, but yeah. And then Dan Lanning for me, I feel like by the time we get to next season, I feel like those Oregon fans are going to be fully embracing Dan Lanning once again. He's going to get back on their side. He's going to have the arrogance. He's going to have, which he should have. I'm not saying it's a bad thing. I think he's going to have a lot of that stuff. He's going to have a lot of confidence from the fan base once they get into the new year again. And I think people are going to be feeling really good about him. I think some people think the Oregon fan base is similar to the Ohio State fan base. I don't think it's like that. I think Dan Lanning bought himself a lot of trust currency with the fan base when he essentially came out and said he was not interested in the Alabama job because he wants to build something special at Oregon.
Yeah.
You think of the Oregon coaches that they have had that's been successful. They've all left, right? Mario Cristobal goes to Miami. Chip Kelly goes to the NFL. Many coaches have looked at this as just a stepping stone school. And I think Dan Lanning is really the first one that's come in that has been openly vocal about it. And they trust that to him, this isn't a stepping stone school. This is a school where he wants to invest and win a national championship at because he believes in the program and he thinks he can make that happen. And I think that buys a lot of trust and, social currency within the fan base.
Yeah. Can I go back to just Sean Foster real quick?
Sure.
Because I agree with you that I do think you're right that there's probably a shorter leash there. UCLA had the number one hardest schedule in the country this year. They played 3 playoff teams, and they defeated 3 Big Ten teams who all went to bowl games. And I look at their schedule next year. They start with Utah, at UNLV, and New Mexico.
Why are they going at UNLV? That drives me crazy.
It's dumb. But
I understood Hawaii to a certain extent. You have Hawaiian players on your team. They want to go back home. I get that. I don't get going to UNLV. Maybe there's some kind of special thing there, and a UCLA fan can tell me in the comments that I'm unaware of. I apologize, but I don't want to go. I don't want Big Ten teams traveling to Group of 5 programs. To me, that you just can't do it.
Yeah, I don't disagree. But then they played at Northwestern. They play Penn State at home, but then they get Michigan State, Maryland, and they have other hard teams. But I think there's a real possibility that UCLA goes to a bowl game next year, and if they do, I think that actually affords a bit more leash as Deshaun Foster is proving himself. So, certainly. I think there is. I think you're right that there is a short leash because of where Deshaun Foster's coming in and his experience level. But I will say that he also has a real opportunity to prove himself because they're not going to have the brutal schedule that they had last year.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. Let's look at Ryan Day for a second. You brought him up as somebody that you would move up if he wins the national championship. I don't know. Call me crazy, but I'm still keeping him at keep up the good work for me. You got to beat your rival at some point. I don't think he is going to have full fan base. Please never leave buy-in until he beats Michigan. I think people are going to be happy with him. Obviously, you win the national championship when people are going to say, "Don't go anywhere. We want you here." But I think there's also going to be a hint of skepticism that's like, boy, we're glad we have Ryan Day. If he can just fix that Michigan issue. We're really glad we have him, but if he can just fix that one issue. It's going to kind of linger around. And, I mean, Ryan Day could be undefeated next year, going to the Michigan game and lose at Michigan. I don't think it's going to be as big as it was this year, but if that happens, you can have people saying he should be fired.
Yeah. I have a question. How many years does a national championship afford Ryan Day?
I think if you beat Michigan in those years, I think it gives you 5 years at minimum.
Well, but if he doesn't beat Michigan.
If he doesn't beat Michigan any of those times, I mean, they're not going to fire him just for not beating Michigan if he won a national championship. But it's going to get the fan base really mad. So I think it's going to be one of those situations where the fan base is very upset. The fan base wants to move on, but the administration won't do it. Anything else on Ryan Day?
Nope.
Okay.
No.
let's talk about James Franklin. James Franklin in the not happy but not mad tier. I am regretting that a little bit. I almost am thinking I should have put him up in the keep up the good work tier, but at the same time, I know the big games thing. It'd be one thing if it was like 1-8, you know, in big games. It's not. It's a
Yeah.
much worse record
Yep.
than that. And I know Penn State fans hate when we bring it up, and I'm not necessarily loving to bring it up either. But the way I look at it is like, I don't know if Penn State fans can say James Franklin is consistently giving them good work when he can't win those big games. Every time they go into a big game, afterwards it feels like they have to defend their coach the entire time.
Yep.
And to a certain point, that gets exhausting for Penn State fans. And so the way I look at it is like, I think people are happy that James Franklin is keeping the program relevant, that he's keeping the program, at a top 10 level, that kind of stuff. But, there is that greater desire for more. And, James Franklin did take him to the semifinals, but he also didn't, beat a huge team on the way. Not trying to take anything away from the SMU and Boise State wins. I think those are still playoff wins. You need to have those accounted for. But it wasn't like he took down a Georgia like Notre Dame did. It's not like he took down a Tennessee like Ohio State did. I think that would have bought him a lot of social currency if he was able to do something like that. But I don't know. What are your thoughts?
I think it's so. I work with a lot of Penn State fans, and I think they don't know what to do with James Franklin, because on one hand they're like, yeah, we get 10 wins almost every year, and they're in the playoff discussion every year for the most part. The only time they're not is when their quarterback's gotten hurt, right? When Clifford got hurt that one year, then everything went off the rails. But the problem is, I'd forgotten this. His biggest win was Ohio State in 2016. That's 8 years ago. And they keep saying to me as a Buckeye fan, we haven't beat you guys we've beat you once 8 years ago. And while I don't think Penn State has beaten Ohio State often over the past 25 years, when Joe Pa was there, like he had a couple wins in a few years, like 2005, 2008, and then 2011, like he's won every 3 years in that span. And then in the 90s, he got a couple wins. Like it was never like 1 and 10. And granted, I think Ohio State has had a generational run over the past 23 years, ever since Tress took over. But I think the fan base is getting tired of coming up just short. And I think that a lot of the losses have been very similar to what transpired last week against Notre Dame. And I think they're like, hey, we've seen this. It's very similar, I think, to how Ohio State fans felt before this playoff run. It's like, we've seen this movie before. We know how it's going to end. I mean, if I had Penn State fans telling me they were dreading winning and beating Notre Dame, because there's like, how bad will it be if we lose to Ohio State in the national championship game? And it's like, man, that's a terrible place to be as a fan.
Yeah, it is.
So I don't regret putting him there, because I think I think Penn State's committed to him, and they're like, if you're going to win 10 games every year, that's great. But I think there is a point, and I think it's coming sooner rather than later, where fan sentiment is going to be like, hey guys, we don't like this. Please listen to us.
I think back to that video that we made where it was like, should James Franklin be fired? And I think you and I defended James Franklin a good amount in that video. Yeah. I think we pointed out a lot of the areas that he's doing well, and I even said, hey, look, Ryan Day's turned the narrative around this year. Who says James Franklin can't in the next few years? Maybe he doesn't turn around and win a national championship, but maybe he gets himself to the playoffs and beats Tennessee, beats Texas, beats a big team like that. But like, I don't know if Penn State fans are going to be patient enough for that to happen, and I get that. But like I said, I looked at the comments of that video, and it was filled with Penn State fans saying, why are you guys hating on James Franklin? We love James Franklin. James Franklin has, been a spectacular coach. He brought us back from, the disasters of after Joe Pa and everything like that. And it's like, I don't know, like I didn't anticipate some Penn State fans to feel, so confident in James Franklin that they would go on and be just upset that I made a video saying should James Franklin be fired, because I would point it out to him. Look, I defended him in the video. I don't know what you're mad at me about. They're like, it's the fact that you would even make a video about it. It's like, all right, well, it's getting talked about, so I'm gonna make a video on it.
That's fair.
But yeah, so all right, that's a good amount of James Franklin talk. The Ohio State Buckeyes says if Ryan Day loses to Michigan, then wins the title, that will make it. Okay, yeah, that will. Is he gonna do it every year? How many Ohio State fans would take a loss to Michigan every year, but a national title?
That'd be that. But if you think about it, it's kind of the Kirby Smart model right now.
Lose to Alabama and then make the national championship. Yeah.
Yeah.
Of course, he did beat Alabama in the national championship. That was his only win over him. So I guess that's kind of vindication.
Yeah.
But
yeah. That's what needs to happen next year. Ohio State needs to play Michigan in the national. No, you know what? They need to play Michigan at the end of the season, beat them, then play them in the Big Ten championship game, beat them, and then play them in the Natty and beat them and be like, it's over. We're done. Michigan curse over.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Jesus Rivera says, "Is Day going to the NFL if he wins the Natty, or is there an obsession with not beating Michigan?" I mean, there's definitely an obsession with not beating Michigan. I don't know how strong Ryan Day, his obsession is with that, but something that I'm learning through this, new format of the college football playoffs is I don't know how many coaches that win the national championship are going to go off to the NFL. Because a lot of these NFL teams are filling their head coaching vacancies before, or like doing a lot of their interviews before the national championship game happens. So, obviously there's still going to be some that are open, but our team's going to find a candidate before that they just fall in love with so much. I don't know. I mean, I'm sure Ryan Day will take some interviews if he gets a lot of interest, but like you think about the Patriots, they hired Mike Vrabel.
Mm-hmm.
That was one many thought, with Ryan Day being from New Hampshire, he would be interested in. Well, not anymore, because they hired Mike Vrabel, who a lot of Ohio State fans wanted to be the head coach if Ryan Day left. But yeah. And then Dave is pointing out here, Dave, this is exactly what I thought. He said he's saying you made a video, there's a lot of them made about it, and if you were being positive, you don't know why they wouldn't like it. And I'm with you, Dave. That's what I thought. Like when I made the video, I'm like, okay, Penn State fans I think will like this, at least the ones that like James Franklin, and then I'll get some pushback from the ones that don't like James Franklin. Nope. I got pushback from the ones that did like James Franklin.
You think they should fire him? No, we didn't. We didn't say that. We didn't say that.
Well, you made a video on it.
Yeah.
Well,
just to the right.
Listen to what we said.
No. Title. You guys are stupid. You didn't listen to it, did you? No. Okay, then why are we being called stupid?
Listen to the video and then come back to me.
Yeah. Can I just the Ryan Day thing?
Do you have anything more you want to point out?
I was going to say I don't think Ryan Day will go off to the NFL. I think his family, like he said this multiple times. He loves that his family is growing up in Columbus, and so I think he wants to be there. I just think a lot of angry fans, which, me included, were like, you got to beat Michigan. What the heck? And now he's gone on this generation. Like, by the way, whoever wins the national championship on Monday, whether it's Notre Dame or Ohio State, it is the greatest accomplishment by a national championship ever.
This is the hardest path any team has ever had to go through to win a national championship.
And I know people will say, well, Ohio State has 2 losses. Notre Dame lost to NIU. I don't care.
Is that how they sound?
Like, I don't care. Like, Ohio State will have beat 5 AP top 5 teams in a year, which will be a record. Notre Dame, I believe, will be up to 4, which ties a record.
What was Ryan Day's top 5 record?
It's like
into the season.
It's like 1-6, I think, or something like that.
So he's still not 500. Gets
He
top
he
five
might
teams.
he might be
Well, but he
500 now.
has a loss to Oregon in the regular season,
Yeah,
so
hold
that
on.
would
Let
make
me.
him 1-7. He wins 5. That would make that would make him 6-7. He just that would mean he went through the hardest gauntlet of a season ever to win the national championship, and he is still below 500 in top 5.
He was no, so he was 4-6 before the playoff. He is now 7-6.
Oh,
Or no, he's 6-6. Sorry, he's
okay.
6 because
And is
Tennessee
Notre
was not a
Dame
top 5 team.
is Notre Dame a top 5 team?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, because they're not seeded as a top 5, but because of the seeding,
Yeah.
they were what 4?
Uh
I forget.
yes. Yeah. Yeah,
All
let me
right. Anything else on the head coaching hot seat tiers that you want to get into before we? They were 5th. I apologize. They are number 5, so they are top 5.
Yep.
Anything else in the head coach hot seat tiers you want to get to before we move on, Zach?
no, I'm good.
All right, I'm good as well. So we will get the graphic down and go on our way out. We did get a couple comments I want to get to before we get out of here. So there's that. And updated. Dave says you were talking about how Minnesota was cheap. I totally forgot that had been a problem since Glenn Mason was at the Gophers. It was one of the reasons that he almost left for Ohio State. Yeah, that was another one that I was surprised we got a pushback from Minnesota fans on. They were like, they weren't happy that we were calling Minnesota cheap, and I was like, well, I don't know. I personally, I want my program to invest as much money as possible, but their reasoning was, that we don't understand the high level financials of big time college football, and less is actually more. To which I responded, less is actually losing more coaches for you, if that's what you mean.
Yeah.
By less is more. But I think Minnesota's too good of a program to be that cheap. Like I think you have too many people that want good for that program. You have too many coaches that have gone through there that have been good that to not invest that much in the program. I mean, it's like the opposite in Nebraska. Nebraska can't buy a good coach. They might have one now with Matt Rule, but prior to Matt Rule, they couldn't buy a good coach. They were funneling as much money in there as they could, and they were wasting it with how many coaches they were buying that weren't good. Minnesota was like, we're not paying all that much, but we can still find a good coach. We can still find a PJ Fleck. We can still find, all these guys. Like, I don't know. It's just interesting. Dave's here says, I'd leave if I were Ryan Day if he has a chance to go to the NFL. It's a better job, regular hours, no recruiting, you get an off season, and no one threatens your children. Yeah, I've never actually seen anybody threaten his children. So, and Kirk Herbstreit lies through his teeth all the time. So I don't know. Anything that only comes from Kirk Herbstreit, I don't know if I actually believe. So who knows? But yeah, I mean, I think some guys, they are just more geared toward developing young men and stuff like that. So I do think that is what attracts them more to college. But you're right, Dave. If he wants to do nothing but football, if he just wants to focus on football, not worry about the parents, not worry about the recruits, all that stuff, it is 10 times better in the NFL than it is in college. So,
Yep.
All right. And Michael says hoarding all that Big Ten revenue and not reinvesting in the team will not turn out well. I think Minnesota does try to put it in other sports. Like they have a very good hockey program. So it's not like they're just taking in the money and not using it. I think they're just using it in other areas. But my thing is like if football is the one giving you the most money, like you need to be trying more, especially when you've seen hope with less money. You put more money into it, you should see more. Sorry, go ahead, Zach.
Well, and I was just going to say, too, I think there is still the old way of thinking in the Big Ten where you don't, and like there's a certain amount that you invest in your assistants. And I still think there are some schools kind of stuck in that mindset. Because if you look at the assistant coaching pay pools, Minnesota is, I think, 12th out of the 18 schools. but a lot of schools are kind of lumped in the same area as them, and they're paying less than Big 12 schools. They're paying less than ACC schools, and it's like there's no reason why. There's no reason why. Because the Big Ten makes more money and they make more revenues. So I think there is a tradition aspect with this that, you know, they got to get ahead and they got to get with the times, but they're just not there yet. It's kind of like Kirk Ferentz with offense.
Hey, but he hired Tim Lester.
Yeah, and we saw what that did.
Had a really good running game this year.
He had a really good run. He had a good running back.
Their biggest flaw was they had Cade McNamara as their starting quarterback for half the season. So,
fair.
Dave says the Minnesota fans do not like it when outsiders criticize them. We can criticize our own teams. You can't is the model at Minnesota. I get that. I get upset when people criticize Ohio State when I feel like they're an outsider as well. So I get that. And that's why I tried to make it very clear in the video that I wasn't necessarily criticizing Minnesota because I dislike them. I was trying to make it clear that I was criticizing them because I felt like I was saying something the fans would probably also be saying, which is we love our program. We want the program to be better.
Yeah.
And that's what I was trying to get at. But I hear you, Dave. I think you're spot on there, and I think a lot of fan bases operate that way. So no matter what, we were going to get pushback from it. You're right.
Yep.
So. All right, Zach. Good show tonight. A lot of good stuff. Anything else you want to get to before we get out of here?
No. This has been a good episode. Grateful for you all, and looking forward to breaking down or talking post game for the national championship game.
That we will. We'll decide what we're gonna do. I don't know if we'll want to come on after that game because it's a Monday night and we both have to work the next day. So I don't anticipate we'll want Philip, not 2.5 hours. Not happening.
DK is not here. We're not going 2.5 hours.
Say in the summer sometime when I just have nothing else to do, I will get Dylan on here. We will we'll do that, but not tonight. But yeah, we probably won't do anything Monday night just with how late it's going to be and everything. We'll probably do our normal standard Tuesday show where we recap it and everything and do it that way. So, all right. Troy says, I expect everyone to criticize the Buckeyes. I wear it as a badge of honor. I have no idea how to handle all the kudos lately. Not used to that. That's true, Troy. Ohio State fans have so many people saying they're going to do well. They're like, we don't know what to do. Everybody normally hates us.
I think that's why we're like, Ohio State should win, but they never win in this state. Like, they have not won as like an outright favorite in a national championship game, at least in my lifetime.
Well, and I think the Michigan game really, really put a lot of distrust in the coaching staff's ability to get the team to perform at a consistent level game in and game out, which should have been rectified with Oregon, Tennessee, and Texas. But I think the way some of the plays were undisciplined in Texas, in that Texas game, and some of the mistakes, it was like, have we really fixed things? But credit to the coaching staff. They were the ones that came in and I think had a good game plan. It was the players that were more undisciplined and had a harder time. So, yeah. Anyway, that's all we got for you. Thank you so much for everybody for being here, for listening to the Big Ten Huddle podcast. We will be back on Sunday night, me and Zach, to have another episode. I don't know when we're going to do basketball again. I talked about it on the basketball episode. I'm working through trying to figure something out. It's just there are literally no nights a week where there's not basketball now. And I know that people don't want to try and watch a basketball episode with basketball going on. And if people are going to listen to a basketball episode the next morning, they probably want to hear about the games from last night. So it's a little bit of a different situation, a little bit harder to try and figure out. But I'm working with Kent and some other guys to try and figure out when the best time to do a basketball show is. So for now, our basketball show is a power ranking show on Monday, and I will be putting out, extra videos and stuff like that during the week. So thank you so much for listening. Thank you so much for joining us, everybody, and we will see you on Sunday night. Have a good one.